BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. First, just a couple of quick announcements before we begin. There is an interview with Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com on the Planet X Filmworks channel. And to those of you who have been following the Zodiac Killer debunking series here on BBOR, there is a new video out about the Zodiac Killer suspect Rick Marshall, which you can find, as I said, on my channel. As always, please like and subscribe. And Blaine, the man who brought Gaikowski forward as a suspect, more or less the informant simply known as Goldcatcher, posted online that he will not talk to any zodiologists. I'm rather bummed about that. I always wanted to connect with Blaine a little bit more, and I've asked him some challenge questions, if you will, about Richard Gaikowski, but he does frequently post on Facebook. So, like the other Zodiac Killer news reports, I've begun with a challenge question, and I would like to start off with that right here. The challenge question for this week, and you can think of this as an icebreaker, respond in the comment section down below if you so choose. The challenge question is, have you ever met someone who had it all but was still miserable? And when we say had it all, it's referring to someone who has a job that seems really interesting to you. Maybe they have a very desirable relationship. Maybe they have a bigger house than the average person. Maybe they have more sports cars than the average person. But they still seem miserable. And this comes from an episode of The Irrational Male that I was watching, which is hosted by Rollo Tomasi. He also has a book series out of the same name. 5 different books are in this series as of now. What he was talking about was, some guys seem like they have it all. They have the great house, they have all the cars, they have a marriage that looks pretty good, but they are still miserable. And the reason why is because they devote every fiber of their being to complaining about other people. Have you ever met anyone like that? And if so, you can share your personal story in the comments section down below. Okay, though, to begin with some of the Zodiac content, I have to give a shout out to Crystal, who sent this one in to the email address. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. And it was, have you ever done an episode on the Z18 code? And my honest answer was no, I've never done an episode completely devoted to that. I was hoping to just do some more things with the ciphers in the future. But as the regular listeners will have seen, I did a debunking episode over the weekend, and also a special bonus episode about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden. So I might do some more episodes on the ciphers. I did one on the Z13 that was done on video, a videographic explanation, if you will. But as far as the Z18, The Zodiac Killer mailed 4 ciphers: the Z408, the Z340, the Z13, and the Z32. The Z408 has been mostly solved, except for the final line, which appears to be just a mash of letters, or there's some type of confusion about what it actually is. And the final line of the Z408 reads E B E O R I E T E M E T H H P I T I. If you had asked me this question back in 2020, what does that mean, this Z18 code? I would have said that it's just the Zodiac Killer trolling you, trolling me, trolling everybody. Because what I thought the Zodiac did at the time was he would send in something that was solvable, but not 100%. Like how I just said, there are 4 ciphers, right? The 408, 340, 13, and the 32. Well, the Z13 and the Z32 are so small that it's almost impossible to solve. The Z408 was very easy to solve. It is a simple substitution cipher. It reads, I like killing people because it is so much fun. It's more fun than hunting wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something is gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl, and so on. But it was decoded rather easily. The cipher was mailed in 3 parts, sent to 3 newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. And this final line here still is uncoded to this day. Now, the reason why I've had somewhat of a reversal on that statement about how this is the Zodiac just trolling people is the 340 cipher was solved several months after I made those comments here on BBOR, and it turns out that there was a solution. It was just very difficult to obtain, and it definitely would have been easier for the Zodiac to create the code for the 340 cipher and encrypt it, rather than having somebody like David Orenchak or Jarl Van Eyck or Sam Blake decrypt it. So I do think that the other ciphers do have solutions. They're just going to be very difficult to obtain. But let's not kid ourselves. The Zodiac really liked to do that. I don't know how conscious it was, but giving people the answers, but not enough answers to when they could actually solve the mystery. As a case in point, the car door at Lake Berryessa. The Zodiac wrote the Zodiac symbol, the word Vallejo, the dates of Zodiac activity, and then signed by knife. Partnered with the Halloween card that was mailed on October 27th of 1970 that says by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. Now, you think you understand what's going on, but wait, do you? The Zodiac would do this all the time, and this Z18 code could quite possibly be an example of that. Perhaps one of the most famous solutions to the Z18 is that it simply reveals Robert Emmet the hippie, and this was put forward by Robert Graysmith, and I'm sure he got it from somebody else. But when I was reading the book Zodiac Unmasked, it actually featured a conversation between Robert Graysmith and Paul Avery, which took place in the 1980s, not the 70s, but the 80s, well after the events that you would see in the David Fincher film. And Graysmith is asking Paul Avery, what do you think the final line of the Z408 cipher is, the Z18 code that we're talking about now? What does that mean? And Avery says, I still think it's Robert Emmet. And who on earth was Robert Emmet? I have a whole episode about him on this channel. It's not even a him, it's what he could be, a legend. It could be referring to a statue of somebody named Robert Emmet in Golden Gate Park, and it's a different clue to somebody else's identity. I mean, we simply do not know, but I don't find that a very convincing solution, because it's not only Robert Emmet, it's Robert Emmet the hippie, and Emmet is spelled E-M-E-T, which, even if you're referring to someone with that name, I mean, that is not the most conventional spelling. Now, speaking of spelling, the Zodiac Killer was famous for his misspellings, and as I was talking about Jack the Ripper last Friday on the Anything Goes segment, Jack the Ripper also sent in communications with misspellings, if that was indeed from the Ripper. There could have been lots of hoaxers in 1888, but the point is, both sets of letters have misspellings. And with the Zodiac, there is somebody named Thomas Henry Warren who wrote The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, who proposed a solution to the Z18, and that is that you have to take some of the misspellings from the text, because it doesn't actually say man is the most dangerous animal of all. It says man is the most dangerous animal of all. Dangeroue. And you'll see that there's no S in the Z18 code, but there are lots of E's. That means you can substitute the letter E and S as needed. And the actual solution is not Robert Emmet, it's Robert Smith. It would actually be Robert Smith, I, and that would mean Robert Smith II, and that's that Graysmith was an active participant in this, and he views Robert Graysmith, author of the 1986 book Zodiac, as well as Zodiac Unmasked, which I was just talking about, as someone who helped spread disinfo and fabricate all types of evidence throughout the 1960s and 70s. But, I mean, I'm not saying that that is true. That is just what someone else has suggested. And Thomas Horn did an episode about this called the code within a code. Oh, I forget the exact title, that it was out on the Stones Unturned podcast, and he also has the channel Professor Dad. But what he said in that one was somebody contacted him and said that, okay, it seems like you're going down the right track, but I've taken it a little bit further, and it's actually Seth meet Robert Smith at Pier 2, or was it Pier 2 or Pier 7? But either way, I think you can get the idea that this would have been a message that some type of individual would have uncoded, or decoded rather, and then they would have had some type of instruction, and that's the reason for getting it into the newspaper. Because the whole thing about Robert Smith II is, if you're going to use the misspellings and drag them down, not all of them are used. For example, I mean, the stuff involving the letter W is not used in the decoded line, so that's one that gives me some doubt, and I do appreciate the thought process of the person who sent that in, because they're exploring new directions, the whole concept of leaving no stone unturned. But there was this YouTuber out there that I listened to back in 2011 who thought that this was not a typical piece of the cipher. It was the guy who did the Death Note voice, and he would say, "My name is T." I talked about him in my first Richard Gaikowski episodes because he thought that Richard Gaikowski was the Zodiac killer. However, what he said was actually something quite interesting, and that is that this is not a message that is meant to be unscrambled. This is something that was used by the painter Da Vinci, where you can hide certain letters inside of other letters. The letter F can hide inside the letter E, and the letter B can go on top of the letter E as well. Like an E can go into a B and an F can go into an E, because the pen strokes that you would make would go on top of them and you could completely conceal them. And his solution, though, was definitely not very convincing, and that was before meet the thy pity. I mean, when I first looked at this, for the very first time, and I found out that there was this type of message that was still coded at the end of the 408, yeah, I looked at the first word and I thought, that looks like the word before, and then this guy puts out a solution that is going down the same path, saying, before meet the thy pity. I just think that that's a little bit too nonsensical. I know the Zodiac isn't perfect with grammar and spelling, but before meet the thy pity, I think that that's a little bit too far out. But that guy went on to do some other episodes talking about hidden messages in the artwork of Da Vinci and The Last Supper in particular, and I think a lot of it is just, well, to be very frank, just throwing anything out there and seeing what's going to stick. But that was talking about Richard Gaikowski as the Zodiac Killer. That's what that guy, My Name is T, thought. But there was someone named Tony Polito who came up with a solution to the Z18. And you might be thinking about, well, does it just have a suspect who has 18 letters in his name? I mean, why not Theodore Kaczynski, right? Well, what about Arthur Lee Allen? And Tony Polito's solution was actually using a metric. He had a 17-page explanation that he put out online for free, talking about how you solve the Z18, but Arthur Lee Allen's name doesn't have 18 letters in it. It has 16 letters. So the solution that he came up with was Mr. Arthur Lee Allen. And again, I mean, we have things, for Richard Gaikowski, for Arthur Lee Allen, for Robert Smith, Robert Emmet, all kinds of names are found in this. And I was just over on ZodiacCiphers.com, and I saw that one possible solution was I am the Zodiac Killer. But I think that there are a couple possibilities that need some very strong consideration. The first is that it was just a mistake on the part of the cryptographer. Whoever created this simply made a mistake, and then that's why the letters all came out as gibberish or nonsense, or this particular line wasn't meant to be encoded that way. Or the skeptical response number 2 is from both Gary Stewart and Steve Hodel. Both of them talked about this. Very questionable researchers, but they said that it's meaningless. It's just to keep you guessing. It has no exact meaning. And I believe that both of them also said that the misspellings have no additional meaning. They're just to confuse people so they can't get the truth. Steve Hodel, author of Most Evil Part 2, and Gary Stewart, of course, author of The Most Dangerous Animal of All. But I have to give a shout out to Playtime, who was the one who shared this with me, that there are 5 E's in the Z18, and the E's could be fillers, and 18 minus 5 is 13, and the Zodiac's My Name Is cipher has 13 symbols. So if you remove the E's, maybe some way, somehow, that will give you the 13 letters that are actually in the killer's name, or some type of active participant's name, depending on your theory. But what do you think about the Zodiac Killer Z18 code? And you can weigh in the comment section down below which theory seems the best to you. Do you think it's the one about Mr. Arthur Lee Allen, or do you think it's Before Meet the Thy Pity? Do you think that they're all meaningless the way that Stewart and Hodel were thinking? What is your response to the Zodiac Z18 code? Any response is welcome. Anything's fair game. Okay. And at this time, I would like to remind everybody that there is a new podcast out by the Zodiac Killer channel called Serial Killer C to A. The first season is dedicated to the crimes of the Zodiac Killer, but there will be some other serial killers that will be covered on that show. The first episode is available on the Zodiac Killer channel, as well as an additional promotional video for our new show that we have been working on. I am the narrator, but all of the content has been created by the team, which is led by Steve Beaumont, as well as many other contributors have worked on that series. You can get it anywhere you get your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, so I invite you to listen. One more time, Serial Killer C to A, and all of the info will be posted on the Zodiac Killer channel's promotional video, but you can get it anywhere you get your podcasts. And right now I would like to move on to the next segment. Last week on the channel I was talking about the case breakers and a video that had been released on their YouTube channel talking about their suspect, Gary Francis Post. The bulk of the case breakers material seems to be coming from a guy named Dale Julin, who is a journalist, but he has apparently been working on this Gary Post theory for 7 years now, and he's going to be releasing a book soon called Catching Zodiac. That is the working title. And the case breakers also have a documentary in the works talking about Gary Post as the Zodiac Killer. Their theory heavily centers on the disappearance of Donna Lass from 1970, and no matter what, I am fascinated with that case, and I always think it's interesting to hear different perspectives on what happened to Donna Lass. You guys know that last year I did a regular segment about her disappearance every Thursday, so I just simply want to know the truth about what happened to Donna. But I was talking about a particular line in the solution to Dale Julin's Dale Julin's solution to the Halloween card, if you will, because the Zodiac Killer milled in letters and ciphers, but he also milled in greeting cards, and Dale Julin has come up with some very intricate solutions to the Halloween card and the Pines card. And in fact, he more or less says that every shape and symbol that you see on these cards has some type of hidden meaning or symbolic meaning, and this is the solution that Dale Julian proposed to the Halloween card. Bye bye birdie, time to fly, A-OK, upside down N, nursed on a lass, body is Y14Y, up in a tree in a hollow log, ponderosa pine tree, E by night, you'll see her now approaching, lunar sunrise and Scorpius blue lock, up gully view, Y by CB MNZ 85 degrees, southeast of Zephyr Cove, 4 miles east on the Hootin' Tootin' MS Dixie ship, OOD, take the helm, aye aye Captain, Gary Francis Post, CC Frank Borman. So, that is a very, very intricate solution. But I'm in a Facebook group about the Zodiac Killer called the Zodiac Killer Library, and I wrote something out for that group that I would like to read to you guys now. In their most recent video, someone challenged Dale Julian on his claim that the Zodiac Killer Halloween card reveals clues about the disappearance of Donna Lass. There is a line near the end of the decoded message that says MS Dixie, which was a riverboat or paddle wheeler that was brought from the Mississippi River to Lake Tahoe. Number 1, the claim is that the MS Dixie was not docking and operational until 1972, therefore Julian's solution is either incorrect or made up. The Zodiac mailed the Halloween card in 1970, 2 years before. Number 2, Dale Julian responded by saying that the boat was there in the 1960s, leaving us with the question number 3, which is the truth. And I shared a little bit of this last week, but that's what I wanted to find out. Well, what is the truth? And if it turns out that you could get some type of incorrect information that is found in his solutions, that would mean that they are not credible and we can simply just move on. Or, as I said previously, those parts of the solutions are incorrect and then either he got it wrong or most of it is wrong in some ways. But the Lake Tahoe News has all kinds of stuff about the history of the Lake Tahoe resorts and such, and it says, after the Amundsen family of Lake Tahoe lengthened, widened, and added a third deck, the MS Dixie debuted in 1972. The MS Dixie, MS meaning motorship, was brought to Lake Tahoe in sections in about 1948, having served on the Mississippi River. It docked variously at Ski Run on the beach, at Timber Cove Pier, and at Zephyr Cove, which became its permanent port. And I also Googled the MS Dixie in the 1960s, and someone is selling postcards of the MS Dixie from that decade, so they claim. When I said so they claim, I zoomed in and examined the cards, and there are no dates that are posted on these, but the person selling them does say they are from the 1960s. And my honest conclusion is I'll give that one to Dale Julian. It does appear that the boat was on Lake Tahoe in the 1960s, therefore, that part all seems to be correct. But my 3 challenge questions were, how likely is it that Gary Post would include a reference to the MS Dixie boat if it wasn't operational? Number 2, what do you think? Is Dale Julian's solution to the Halloween card correct, or did he just get lucky with the dates? And the bonus question is, why call it the Hootin' Tootin' MS Dixie if it was years away from operating as a cruise ship? And the honest answers to those questions for me is, I don't know to all of them, but to actually try to answer these, I would think that Dale Julian just got lucky with the dates, because if you listen very carefully, you would have heard that the challenger said the boat, the MS Dixie, did not dock there at Zephyr Cove, which is mentioned in his solution, until 1972, and that's what it says here. Y by CB MNZ 85 degrees southeast of Zephyr Cove, 4 miles east of State Line on the Hootin' Tootin' MS Dixie ship. So, I would think that Dale Julian just got lucky with the dates, and maybe he assumed that it was already an operational cruise ship in 1970, but it wasn't until 1972. Now, as far as State Line that is mentioned in there, that does not refer to the border of California and Nevada state line is the town where Donna Lass disappeared. She disappeared on September 6th of 1970 while she was working the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift in the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino in State Line, Nevada. Her apartment complex was in present-day South Lake Tahoe, California, but the border of California and Nevada was redrawn in the 1980s. Now, if some of you have been looking at the graphic of Lake Tahoe going by, you may be thinking that I was, well, how long is 4 miles? Is Lake Tahoe 4 miles across? And I Googled that too, and from north to south, Lake Tahoe is about 22 miles, and from east to west, it is about 12 miles across. But then suddenly I began to realize, wait a second, Zephyr Cove is on the east coast of Lake Tahoe. That means if you go 4 miles east of State Line, Nevada, and 85 degrees south, you're on land, which is what Dale Julian wanted us to think, that Donna Lass was hanged from a tree, as he said, put a she in the tree, and Donna Lass is in a hollow log ponderosa pine tree. But that's on land, not on the lake at all. Why on earth is he talking about the MS Dixie on a cruise ship? And if it's at an inland location, there would be no way you could access that location by the MS Dixie. And that's what it says here, though. Why by CBMNZ 85 degrees southeast of Zephyr Cove, 4 miles east of State Line on the Hootin' Tootin' MS Dixie ship. So I'm more and more thinking that this is a nonsensical solution that may actually have a lot of errors that we will encounter in the near future. Now, I said I posted this in a group called the Zodiac Killer Library on Facebook, and somebody challenged me by saying, well, Dale Julian never said Gary Francis' post was on the boat. And I was thinking, you know what? We are in agreement. Dale Julian never said Gary Francis' post was on that boat. I also never said that Gary Francis' post was on that boat. You're not even saying that Gary Francis' post was on that boat. Why on earth did you share that with me? Some people you just can't converse with because no matter what you say, they're just going to try and nitpick at any piece of information they can find, or they're going to try and twist and distort things. It's the whole concept of if you cannot convince, you confuse. But, I mean, I've said a lot of things about Gary Post as a Zodiac Killer suspect, but I don't think I've ever said that he was on a boat. But I would like to reinforce that challenge question for you guys. Why would Gary Francis' post include any type of reference to the MS Dixie ship if it was years, plural, away from operating as a cruise ship? Okay, what did he see this boat one day? Hey, let me get a closer look at that MS Dixie. Well, okay, I'm going to include that in my solution to the Halloween card, the hidden messages on the artwork. But even though it's not going to be operational for a couple more years, but I'm just going to do it anyway because I guess I like the name or something like that. And I really have no idea. I think it's a very weird thing to include. And more importantly, he calls it the Hootin' Tootin' MS Dixie. You're going to call it a Hootin' Tootin' boat if it's not even taking passengers or... Well, I mean, it's not operating as a cruise ship. I want to be as clear as possible so I don't misstate something. I just think it's a very bizarre solution. And obviously, I don't think very highly of the Casebreakers material, but I cannot say that it's 100% wrong. Everything seems to match up with those dates. I'm definitely leaning toward this being an inaccurate deciphering of the artwork on the Halloween card. And to address the elephant in the room, I'm not even convinced that every single symbol on the Halloween card contains a hidden meaning. I mean, it's possible, maybe, but I think if there is some type of hidden meaning in the artwork, it's going to be much simpler than that. Like, for example, one time I drew some connecting lines together because the eyes on the skeleton are just dots, but then there are these eyes on the trees. So it's like maybe there's like a hidden message in there to reveal somebody's initials, like an R, a J, a G, and an S. Something like that, I think, is more plausible than this whole thing. East by night, you'll see her now approaching lunar sunrise in Scorpius. Blue lock up, gully view. That also sounds very, very different than the Zodiac killer's language, because the Zodiac would say stuff more like, I am the the murder of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July. This stuff is definitely appearing to be more technical, actually. Y14Y, AOK upside down N. I mean, this stuff seems linguistically different than the Zodiac Killer's material as well. But what do you think? What do you think? Feel free to weigh in on this solution to the Halloween card. And the final note on the case breakers is a question that came to us from Zeke, who sent this into the Instagram page. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram, and you can also get access to a special bonus podcast over there. But what Zeke said was, "Hey Ned, great show, love listening, you do a great job. One question though, you downgrade and insult the Casebreakers crew because they are going to publish a book, but a lot of people you are friendly with and who you praise have also published Zodiac books. Mark Hewitt, Thomas Horan, Tom Voigt, Michael Cole, Drew Beeson, not sure if he has published a Zodiac book, but he has published other true crime books. And this is just a friendly question, not that big of a deal. I was just curious what your thoughts on that were. Thank you, and again, you do an awesome job working this case. Very enjoyable listening to your YouTube show." And Zeke, thank you for the question. Firstly, yes, Drew Beeson does have a Zodiac book. His is called Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer. But what is the difference between the case breakers and the people that you just mentioned? Well, I have no problem with people publishing books, selling books, having for-profit material. The reason why I am opposed to the case breakers, and I've been very critical of them, is because I believe they are fraudulent. I believe that they are liars, and they are simply trying to do something very deceptive. I don't know everything that's going on with their battle plan, but I do not trust them. And also, I did not like their press release that they shared last year when they said they solved the Zodiac Killer mystery. So that's the long and short of it. I don't think that their material is credible, but it's really not about selling a book, because there's a reason why people sell books, and it's not only to make money, and they're definitely not trying to profit from the tragedies that have happened, the murders that have happened. The people that you listed off that are selling Zodiac books are selling their analysis, not taking advantage of murder victims. But I believe that everybody you said in those lists there is mostly telling the truth with their theory. With the case breakers, no, I don't. I believe there is something fraudulent going on. What exactly? Well, that's a mystery in itself, and I've encountered that so many times in the Zodiac world. What is the true motivation for these researchers? Because there are so many people out there who are doing things that appear to be inappropriate, where it's kind of halfway in the door of inappropriate, halfway they are a decent person, and the other half is something that you're not quite sure about. I absolutely believe that there are some genuine frauds out there. People who recognize that the Zodiac Killer mystery is somewhat popular, so they come up with these wild theories to stand out from the game. But in all seriousness, the case breakers didn't seem to do that. They have a very ordinary suspect. They say that there was a single killer that operated from 1966 to 1970. Maybe they're going to be accusing Gary Post of things back to the murder of Ray Davis, but a single serial killer. They just say they've identified the Zodiac, but they definitely include pre-Zodiac and post-Zodiac crimes, most notably the murder of Sherry Jo Bates and the disappearance of Donna Lass. But thanks for the question. And in the next piece here, I would like to revisit the Zodiac Manson connection. I got back on this subject because I did 2 recent episodes about the Manson family and the Tate LaBianca murders, which occurred in between the Zodiac Killer's activities on July 4th of 1969 and September 27th of 1969. The Tate LaBianca murders attributed to the Manson family took place in August of that year, and I started listening to the Tate LaBianca program again, and I also went back and found some of the older interviews that were done with Lynette Squeaky Fromme, and those were back from only 2018 and 19. When I say older, I mean just in the past couple of years, not talking about anything from the 60s. But after Squeaky got out of jail for pulling a gun on President Ford, she wrote a book called Reflection. She was doing several interviews to promote it, and some of them you can still hear on the channel The Church of Rock. And she talks about the nature of the Manson family, as well as the way that the media chose to portray everybody. But with the Zodiac Manson connection, there are mostly three angles, that can be explored. The first is that Charles Manson's right-hand man, Bruce Davis, was the Zodiac killer. The second is an additional layer to that. Not only was Bruce Davis the Zodiac, but Charles Manson was the mastermind of the Zodiac crimes. Whether it's 68 to 69 or just 1969, that those are also some of the activities of the Manson family. And the third variant or angle of the Zodiac Manson connection is that there were multiple members of the Manson family who committed the murders that took place in 1968 and 69, and that would even explain why Bruce Davis was out of the country in December of 1968 when he was in England, possibly going to continental Europe as well, but not in the United States of America or anywhere near the Bay Area. And during one of the previous episodes that I did, an old black box recording, I even did the guys who believe in the Zodiac Manson connection a favor by saying that, well, the Manson family is heavily connected to the biker gangs, most notably the Straight Satans, and then if you were to develop some type of connection that the Lake Herman Road murders were a drug-related or gang-related shooting, that's how the killer could have learned about that, because after the next crime committed by the Zodiac killer, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, which took place on July 4th of 1969, the killer took credit for both crimes at once, writing a single letter saying, "I am the murderer of the two teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July. So that was even something where I was throwing them a bone. By them, I mean guys like Howard Davis, author of the Zodiac Manson Connection. Bill Nelson has also talked a lot about this. He wrote the book Manson Behind the Scenes. And there are several people who have written into the channel saying that they believe that Bruce Davis was the Zodiac killer. And they heavily do this by linking him to pre-Zodiac crimes such as the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates, as well as the 1963 Domingos-Edwards murders, because the Manson family is mostly operating in Southern California, and that's what I was going at, though. That's another reason why I wanted to revisit this subject, because I'm listening to these interviews with Squeaky, aka Lynette, aka Red, and what I wanted to know is, where is the talk of the Zodiac killer? If there's an ounce of credibility to this Zodiac Manson connection, where is the talk of San Francisco? Of course she's not going to say something like, oh yeah, well, Charles Manson was an active participant in planning the Zodiac murders. The interesting thing about Squeaky is that she remained loyal to Manson all the way until the end. And yes, she's still alive. He has passed away. Charles Manson passed away in 2017. But what I'm not seeing is there's no slip up at all of saying that, oh yeah, I was in San Francisco in September of 1969, and this is what happened. The closest you're going to get is that there are these stories that Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's right-hand man for a period of time, was the rover of the group, and he's going to this place and that place, and he's on this type of mission that isn't really explored in a lot of the follow-ups. But my biggest problems with the Zodiac Manson connection, as it's been shared by Howard Davis, is there are so many assumptions and excuses that have to be made for why his suspect doesn't fit. Number one, Bruce Davis was a rather short man. He was, I don't know his exact height in 1969. I have a photo of him where he's listed as 5 feet 6 inches tall, but it's in his older years. And then Howard Davis says, well, he could have been wearing platform boots and shoes at Lake Berryessa. That's why he appeared taller. And Bruce Davis had rather long hair in 1969, and how would he match the composite sketch after the Stein shooting? And Howard Davis said, well, the Manson family's very good with makeup. He could have been wearing a skull cap and crew-cut wig, and they could have made it look really authentic. And then they also were very good with disguises. He could have drawn lines on his face. And, I mean, all of these, just that. You have to start making assumptions. And then there's even one that is a little more important. Where was Bruce Davis on October 11th of 1969 to commit the murder of Paul Stein? Was he in San Francisco or was he in Death Valley? Because he's arrested on October 12th of 1969 during a raid at the Barker Ranch in just that Death Valley. And Howard Davis, his theory is that he would have committed the Stein murder on October 11th and then taken a flight to Las Vegas and then gotten a ride from Las Vegas to Death Valley to the Barker Ranch just to get arrested on the evening of 1969. And I had the opportunity to talk to Howard Davis about this on the Zodiac Killer Channel's Interview with the Expert series. If anybody would like to hear more, it's mostly just his responses in there, and he gave some very, very long, drawn-out responses. But that is what he said, because somebody was asking me that question recently, and they were saying, now how on earth would he have gotten from San Francisco to the Barker Ranch from October 11th to October 12th? Did he fly to Los Angeles? If I recall correctly, I don't believe he flew to Los Angeles. I believe it was Las Vegas and then got a ride there. If, right? And also at this time, we have to address the elephant in the room. 99% of people do not believe that Bruce Davis was the Zodiac killer, or that there was any type of Zodiac Manson connection, whether it's a group murder theory, or that Charles Manson orchestrated the Zodiac crimes. Absolutely not. And again, some people are quite suspicious of Bruce Davis having involvement in the murder of Sherry Jo Bates or the Domingos-Edwards murders. I personally think he's also too small to have been the perpetrator in the Domingos-Edwards murders that took place on June 4th of 1963, which definitely resembles a Zodiac crime. The Domingos-Edwards murders resemble a Zodiac crime gone wrong, where on, just as I said, June 4th of 1963, Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards are on a senior skip day trip to the beach. It is the afternoon, and somebody approaches them carrying a gun and pre-cut lengths of rope and a knife, very similar to the Lake Berryessa stabbing. But what I think could be a very suitable alternative theory is that it was a sexual assault gone wrong, that Robert Domingos was tied up and somebody cut Linda Edwards' swimsuit to try and sexually assault her. Robert Domingos broke free from the restraints and assaulted him. Not really assaulted him, I guess it's defending her. I mean, because again, that guy's the assailant, and Robert Domingos punched him in the face, is perhaps a better way of putting it, and then the two of them took off running, and then the perpetrator started firing, killing them both, and then dragged their bodies to the seaside shack. Robert Domingos was dragged along his stomach, but Linda Edwards was dragged along her back, so we do not know when exactly the swimsuit was cut. And that's just my personal take on the subject, and I'm not even 100% convinced of that, as I said. I mean, I'm actually rather uncertain. I just would put that as the possibility that I lean toward the most. And no, I don't believe that that was the Zodiac killer. But that also means that it wouldn't be somebody like Bruce Davis, 5'6", 5'7", 5 feet 8 inches tall, and some small, slender guy. I was talking about this in the Zodiac Killer Library group as well, how I think the perpetrator in the Domingos-Edwards case was much larger, someone that Robert Domingos, a football player, would have been intimidated of. If it's a 5'6" Bruce Davis, and he probably would have been able to fight back a little bit more once he was out of the way of the gun. Or like once he was able to punch the perpetrator in the face once, he would have tried to either wrestle for the gun or the knife or something like that. He wouldn't have been intimidated of somebody smaller than him, and he would have pummeled him until he could have been sure that he was no longer a threat to him or Linda. But that's just my take on the subject. And I do need to reiterate that point, though. If there is some type of connection between Charles Manson and the Zodiac killer, why not a single slip-up? I mean, I haven't found one in all the interviews that I've listened. I haven't found anyone just accidentally saying, oh yeah, well, that Lake Berryessa, this and that, Blue Rock Springs, this and that, Lake Herman Road, this and that. They just aren't present. I mean, 50 years after the crimes have happened, all the times that people have been questioned and interviewed about things. But I just don't see an ounce of evidence that is leaning toward that way. And especially when you're going to look at this type of group murder theory that says that not only Bruce Davis would have been involved, but other participants. I mean, I don't know who those would be. Tex Watson, maybe. Paul Watkins. No, not Paul Watkins. He wasn't good at anything. But are the women involved? And a lot of it would be just guesswork. But I think that that's just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what would stick. Or in more literal terms, just seeing how far you can take a wild theory, coming up with this wild idea. How far is it going to go that Charles Manson orchestrated the Zodiac crimes? But what I do notice when I'm listening to the Tate LaBianca radio program hosted by Brian Davis and Tana Laufenberg is that they have a very different approach to a true crime case than the Zodiac killer mystery. Because Brian Davis openly says that he has been researching the Manson family for 15 years, and a lot of that has been done on the air, doing a weekly show. And as you can hear, I do a weekly segment about the Zodiac killer, Zodiac Mondays, here on Black Box Online Radio. Please like and subscribe. And I've regularly been putting out content over the last couple of years. I guess I've spent 5 years closely looking into the Zodiac killer material. But the big difference is it's an unsolved case. And I see people writing this stuff into Tom Voigt's channel all the time. Oh, it's been so many years and you haven't discovered anything. And I saw Tom Voight recently respond to someone saying that it's not his job to arrest the perpetrator. It's not his job to find out everything that happened or to solve the case. That is for law enforcement, the FBI, and the authorities. But with something such as the Manson family, for all intents and purposes, we know who committed those crimes in 1969. There have been convictions for those crimes, and the Manson family is mostly still in jail. Bruce Davis, whom we've been discussing, as well as Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, they are still in prison. Tex Watson, of course, perhaps the most influential participant in the Tate LaBianca murders. And they are still locked up, so you can just always give commentary on the people. Oh yeah, there was such and such interview with such and such participant in the Manson family activities, and this is what they said, and this is my response to it. That seems like such an easier ride, so to speak, and I don't mean to put down the work. I mean, Brian Davis and Tana Laufenberg do an enormous amount of investigations. They're the people who go through 5,000 pages of trial transcripts to actually try and find out what happened. When I say easier, I just mean the pressure is off. You can always give commentary on the solved case. But I do think that that is a perfect example of how there are all of these negative Nellies out there who say that, some people just want these true crime mysteries to remain unsolved because if they were solved, no one would pay attention to them. As a case in point, Manson. I mean, as I said, there were convictions in the Manson family cases and the Tate LaBianca murders. Convictions, and the people stayed in prison. Yet there has been a decades-long fascination with these people. And even the Golden State Killer, another one that has happened in somewhat recent time. I have done no less than 7 episodes on the Golden State Killer, and it's definitely one of the biggest true crime discoveries in the last 10 years, solving that mystery and putting Joseph D'Angelo behind bars. And the other lesson from that is not only is that DNA, genealogical DNA, very valuable with the Golden State Killer, it's also that sometimes there is just one criminal who is committing all of these crimes, because looking back, I doubt I would have thought that all of those were connected, because for a while they called the Golden State Killer the East Area Rapist, and he was even known as Ear, and that was one thing Michelle McNamara really didn't like, that he was simply referred to as Ear for East Area Rapist, and no one was really paying attention to the case. And then he was known as the original Night Stalker after Richard Ramirez became the Night Stalker. He was the original Night Stalker, so they called him Earons. Again, no one was paying attention to the case, so Michelle McNamara coined the term the Golden State Killer. She is the author of All Be Gone in the Dark, and that's another case in point. Just because a case is solved, it doesn't mean people lose fascination. After D'Angelo was put behind bars, they launched the All Be Gone in the Dark miniseries on HBO, the All Be Gone in the Dark podcast, which I listened to and responded to here on Black Box Online Radio. So much has happened with that, and I mean, people really just want to know more about the true crime world, and whether it's with serial killers or people trying to solve a missing persons case, I think people just simply want to know more. And if there's something more that you can explore, then, well, so be it, and share that out. I love listening to the Tate LaBianca radio program. Sometimes it gets a little bit abrasive, but I'm really glad that there is someone out there giving commentary. On an interesting side note, I caught one of the recent episodes, and Tana Laufenberg is the co-host. She's the author of And the Defense Never Rested, a book about the Manson family. And she said that she had the opportunity to interview Charles Manson, and what he told her was, in the most gentle way, anytime he said something, people heard the exact opposite. And an example would be, I played an audio clip from him on the channel recently when he talked about Sharon Tate's body all naked and murdered. That was the altar. And people would listen to something like that and they would think, oh, well, he's talking about how Sharon Tate was some type of sacrifice to some evil power. And no, he didn't mean it like that. He just and she was murdered. But Stephanie Harlow did a 6-part series on Charles Manson, and her take on that subject was Charles Manson just talked in circles, and people projected their own meaning onto him, and it was all done by design. It was all done by design. He learned all about this in prison. He was exposed to Scientology, as well as other types of science fiction, even that he would have learned about in his own illiterate way. So he would have been able to just put on that type of sing-song voice and the persona and the presentation, and people would see something that they wanted to see in his bizarre behavior. But in one interview, though, that Charles Manson did, he just got up and he started dancing and waving his arms around, and he said, the reason why people want to talk to me is because I'm always doing something different, or just he's always going to surprise people in a particular way. But as far as the media coverage that was shared in the interviews put out by Squeaky Fromy, she was saying that there is a lot of distortion out there. And it was kind of saddening to hear, because she's saying, that's just the world we live in. I can't fight it anymore, that people are going to be saying things about me that are not true. And I mean, do I actually feel bad for her? Halfway, but because I do think that she was a serious criminal and she got away with a lot of things. But to get back on point, she said that there are a lot of things that are said about her and the Manson family that are not true, because the Manson family were growing in numbers. The family was getting bigger, and there are more participants that have been involved. And if a story involved someone who wasn't that famous, some writers cannot get something past their editors, and the publishing houses are saying, no, we don't want to hear about this person. Nobody's going to know who this member of the Manson family was, or this person who had a brief interaction with Charles Manson. You have to say that this was Lynette. You have to say that this was Patricia Krenwinkel, or you have to say that this was Susan Atkins, some of the more famous members of the Manson family, even if it's not true. But they have to put that in there because they're trying to sell books. So that's what she meant when she was saying that it's just an inevitable reality that they're going to spread disinfo for profit, and she even said that she was in fact offered more money for her book, A Reflection, which is spelled with an X, Reflexion, and she would have been offered more money to say things in the book that wasn't true, but she refused to do it because she doesn't have too much to gain at this point. She was in jail for, 34 years for pulling a gun on President Gerald Ford in the 80s, and one of the few Manson family members to get paroled, and the ones who were involved with the Tate LaBianca murders are still in jail to this day. And my takeaway from getting back into the world of Manson is rather simple. Oh, they got off easy because a lot of the crimes that were committed by the Manson family were simply not prosecuted. I almost said persecuted. No, we're not dealing with persecution, prosecution. And as I was going through Stephanie Harlow's 6-part series, there are so many stories of how Lynette, aka Squeaky, aka Red, was witness tampering, how she is harassing people, assaulting people, threats, intimidation, and not convicted for any of that, not charged with any of that. Now, in the past, I did an episode once when I was talking about the CIA connection in the Manson family, and to be honest with you guys, the CIA connection with Manson has a much higher chance of being true than that of the Zodiac killer. That this is all part of Operation Terrify America, where they're trying to influence modern culture to get rid of the hippie movement. The Zodiac killer's operating in San Francisco, the most important city for the hippies, and Charles Manson is in Southern California, but they're showing how sex, drugs, and rock and roll can turn you into a dangerous person. And one thing that I heard from Squeaky in some interviews, again on the Church of Rock, that's the name of the YouTube channel that's uploaded them, is that the Manson family did not identify as hippies. Stephen Kay, the prosecutor, once called them out saying they were slippies, they were slipping under the cover of being hippies. She denied that as well, saying that we didn't have any labels, we didn't even call ourselves the Manson family. They were just some people that were living in an area together. They had no real direction other than Charles Manson. And Charles Manson openly said in an interview that the reason why they're called the Family is the name of their musical act was the Family Jams, and that everybody who was staying at the Spawn Ranch did some part of the performance or played some role in the musical group. So that's why they were called the Family Jams. And kind of weird music if you ever get a chance to listen to some of that stuff, but I did an old episode of Black Box Online Radio in 2020 when I was talking about if there were any two people that I thought were CIA influenced, it would have been Bruce Davis or Squeaky Fromy, because with Bruce Davis, he's the rover of the group. He's always going different places. You read a book and it's like, oh, they got to pick up Bruce Davis from Malibu. And as I said, he was in England, as well as going into continental Europe and North Africa in 1968 and 69, so they say. But that is the only thing that gives an ounce of credence to Bruce Davis as a Zodiac killer suspect. The fact that he is just kind of roaming around the world. But as far as a CIA connection, I don't think that a CIA operative would have gone to jail for 34 years like Squeaky, or still in jail to this day like Bruce Davis. Instead, something like that, what I meant was maybe influenced or deceived by the CIA, used as a CIA informant, and got tricked into doing something that would have set off some type of chain reaction. But on the Stones Unturned podcast, Thomas Henry Horn speculated that Mary Bruner, of all people, would have been more likely to have been some type of CIA-influenced individual, because she could actually pull that off a little bit more. And not only was Mary Bruner the first member of the Manson family to connect with Charles Manson, or the first woman to
connect with him, but she was someone who lived rather close to a CIA office in Wisconsin, where she was from. And what Stephanie Harlow pointed out was Mary Bruner was present when Gary Hinman was being accosted by the Manson family. He's the guy that got cut in the ear by Charles Manson, and then Bobby Beausoleil stole his car and was caught very easily. And Bruce Davis was actually convicted for the murder of Gary Hinman. Bruce Davis is not present for the Tate LaBianca murders of Sharon Tate and the four others, as well as the LaBiancas the next night. So Bruce Davis was convicted for the murders of Gary Hinman and Shorty Shea. But as far as any type of CIA involvement, it's possible. And if anything, I say possible, it's more of what Tom O'Neill said when he pointed out that an informant is not the same as an operative. An informant just means somebody they were using to gather information. So, I mean, any of those people might have fit the bill. I don't know 100%, but I absolutely do not think a CIA operative would spend 50 years in prison for something. I mean, they would have found a way to get them out, so to speak, or why are they even in jail for 50 years unless that's one dedicated informant or operative if they were a willing participant in something like that. But other people have written into the channel saying the exact same thing. They said that they thought that Bruce Davis had some type of CIA connection. I thought about it. I didn't think it was the most ridiculous thing that he was, as I said, maybe duped by some other CIA individual into starting some type of chain reaction set of events. But there is a final point about the Zodiac Manson connection that I need to share, and that actually involves the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. I've said about Ted Kaczynski as a Zodiac killer suspect that I don't need to call his inaccuracies assumptions, because they're like, well, maybe he was wearing different shoes, maybe he was trying to disguise his appearance in this way. Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber. He was convicted of those crimes. In his cabin in Lincoln, Montana, they found shoes that had the soles of different boots glued onto them. Maybe they're more like boots, period. But he did stuff like that. He also wore two coats at the same time to make himself look bigger. He also, actually one time he even pulled a pubic hair out of a urinal to put in one of the bombs to send fake evidence in. And of course, wearing the sunglasses, he was all about these types of disguises. So I always said with the Zodiac Unabomber connection, I don't need to hear any more explanations about how Ted Kaczynski could have committed the crimes while wearing the disguises. So thus, in turn, I do have to give some credit to Howard Davis and the way that he has constructed his narrative. Okay, maybe Bruce Davis was wearing a wig. Maybe Bruce Davis was wearing platform shoes. Maybe he got a flight to Las Vegas. Maybe he was wearing pencil crayon makeup on his face at some times. Okay, all of those things, I mean, not only are they possible, but the Manson family did them, and it's not simply that he's saying that. Tex Watson talked about this very clearly, how his first job in California was working at a wig store that sold wigs, and he even tried to start a wig store of his own that didn't go anywhere, working with another person, that is. It wasn't only Tex involved in the venture, and I have an episode about his autobiography, Will You Die For Me, available here on this channel. You can also hear the audio book on YouTube. I just saw somebody had uploaded that, but I've read that one last year and I did a response to it, and I got it from Tex Watson's website, Abounding Love Ministries, I think was the name. It's been quite a while. So with the Zodiac Manson connection involving Bruce Davis as the Zodiac killer, I can follow it a little bit more. But at the same time, I just think that it's a wild, far-fetched theory that does not have a lot of value. And again, almost all of us believe that it's not true. We listen to that type of material because I guess curiosity gets the better of us, and you want to see how somebody is going to string together some type of connection between the Zodiac killer and Charles Manson. And I am absolutely fascinated by the members of the Manson family. I always want to hear more about them. That's why I spent hours listening to interviews with Squeaky, and I wish there were more interviews with Bruce Davis online. And everybody loved listening to Charles Manson. And part of me was thinking about that with Manson, that he would have done so much better if he had been born 40 years later, growing up with the internet. Then he wouldn't even have had to focus so much on music, because the real thing that people have loved from Charles Manson is not his singing and his guitar playing. It's the interviews that he has done where he does what we've been talking about, talking in that circular sing-song type of way that people can project their own meaning onto it. But the only way that that works is if someone is interviewing him. I mean, if he were to just sit there in front of the webcam, do one of those talk to the camera YouTube channels, and be like, "Prison doesn't begin or end at the gate. Prison is in the mind." It only works because, well, somebody has already taken an interest in him because something bad has happened, and he is in prison, so he has this story to talk about. So I had to retract that particular statement. But what do you think about the Zodiac Manson connection? What do you think about any of these angles that were mentioned, that it was Bruce Davis, number 2, Charles Manson was the mastermind, and number 3, that it was a group murder effort on the part of the Manson family? Who knows which participants that would be? You can weigh in the comments section down below. If you think that it's absolute nonsense, you will not hurt my feelings, but, and I mean, I'm being very blunt, almost certainly not. It's almost certainly not true that there actually is this type of Zodiac Manson conspiracy going on. But yeah, I always listen to people when they share theories like that. And anyway, and right now I would like to continue onward with some of the material from last week's Anything Goes Friday segment about Jack the Ripper, and most notably something about Jack the Ripper's alleged third victim, Elizabeth Stride. Liz Stride was actually born in Sweden under the name Elizabeth Gustafsdotter, and she made her way to England, and she is perhaps one of the most highly debated Jack the Ripper victims because, unlike the other victims, her body was not mutilated. And I also wanted to go back through some of the old things that I had been talking about last year because, I mean, it's been about a year ago since I did my episode on the murder of Liz Stride, and I wanted to refresh in my own ways. But firstly, I would like to read off a comment that I read from Matthew Lawton on the episode Jack the Ripper, the From Hell Letter full analysis, which I invite you to listen to if you haven't heard it yet. But Matthew Lawton says, Elizabeth Stride wasn't a victim of Jack the Ripper for the following reasons. Number 1, she was killed south of Whitechapel Road. Number 2, she wasn't strangled. Number 3, the knife used was different. Number 4, the cut to the throat was different. Number 5, she was lying on her side, whereas all the others were on their backs. Number 6, there was much more blood at her crime scene. Number 7, the killer drew attention by shouting out Lipsky. As the others were strangled and cut to the throat, Elizabeth Stride was probably killed by somebody else. And during the episode that I did on the From Hell letter, I said that I thought it was quite odd that this guy would point out that there would be less blood at a victim's crime scene where she was not mutilated compared to one who has. So I received this comment from Shaper Art that says, Ned, the reason there was more blood at the scene of the murder of Liz Stride is because she was not strangled prior to having her throat slashed. This is also the reason why the Ripper was able to walk away from these crime scenes without being drenched in blood, and the reason that these crimes were probably committed by a serial killer and not the roving gangs who were known for attacking women in Whitechapel at the time. The MO was the same with the exception of one victim who was likely not a Ripper victim based on the MO and lack of mutilation. That is Liz Stride. The Ripper strangled the victims first so that that would stop their hearts. Once the heart is no longer beating, you're able to slice into someone's throat or any major artery without causing arterial spray, because the heart is no longer pumping blood. He did this so he could mutilate the victims without becoming drenched in blood himself. The reason he did not mutilate Liz Stride is because he didn't kill her. Although, to throw in one interjection, there is the Saucy Jackie postcard that was mailed in that said, "Double event tonight." The first one squealed a bit, so I couldn't do my thing, but the Ripper did provide an explanation as to why that didn't happen. Now, was that actually written by the killer? We don't know. There's a very high chance that the Saucy Jack postcard was a hoax, meaning someone wrote a letter taking credit for a crime they didn't commit, but I just wanted to point out that it was addressed in the letter. Back to the comment here. Interesting Ripper side note. On the corner of 7th and Federal Highway, on the east end of downtown, in the town of Delray Beach, Florida, there stands a pub called the Blue Anchor, which was first opened in Whitechapel in 1848 by Younger and Sons. The bar was evidently mentioned in several police reports, indicating that 2 of the Ripper victims had been seen drinking there before they were murdered later in the evening by Jack the Ripper. The interior of the bar, as well as the outside facade, were later diminished and shipped to the United States after a period of storage in New York City, reassembled and opened in 1996 in the quiet, quaint beach town. Okay, Shaper Art, thank you so much for that comment. But the points that I had talked about in my episode last year on the murder of Liz Stride were that I thought there was about a 10% chance that she was murdered by the Ripper. I mean, absolutely tragic and terrible what happened to her. Rest in peace to her, as well as all the other Jack the Ripper victims. But when I was reading up on her case, there's this man that is seen with her, following her for an extended period of time, and then there is the incident that took place that led to her death, and the Ripper would go on to commit the double event, right, as we said, murdering a second woman. That was Catherine Eddowes, who was murdered in the same night, and I couldn't believe it when I was hearing this stuff about the timeline. Less than a quarter of an hour later, they say, that's less than 15 minutes later, he met Catherine Eddowes and murdered her, cut out her kidney, and that's allegedly the kidney that was mailed in with the From Hell letter, half a kidney to be specific. And the reason why I thought that wasn't the same person was for quite different reasons than what Shaper Art and Matthew Lawton wrote out in their comments. I thought that that showed a very intense familiarity with the town, with the city, about how he could find a sex worker, for lack of a better term, or how he could get a woman to a vulnerable place. Maybe that's a more polite way of putting it. And if someone could do it so easily, why is he spending all this time with Liz Stride, which could draw attention to himself, which did draw attention to himself? And it seemed like the perpetrator who went after Catherine Eddowes on the night of the alleged double event was much stealthier, which was very swift, very cunning, and as I said, showed some awareness of the town. But I simply think that that is just somebody taking credit for a murder that they did not commit. Now, I mean, there are all kinds of theories about what happened with Jack the Ripper, because discussing this in the comments and replying to Shaper Art, I hope I don't misstate your theory, but it was that there was a real serial killer, there was a real Ripper who committed 4 out of the 5 canonical Ripper crimes, the murders of Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly, but that the murder of Liz Stride was not Jack the Ripper. However, Shaper Art said the killer did not send in the letters. Those were all hoaxes. So that shows that, okay, it's a hoax theory, but it's also a single killer theory, minus 1 victim, meaning there was a Ripper, but the media coverage around the Ripper was heavily manipulated by the newspapers. I thought that was a very interesting theory. What actually happened, I have absolutely no idea. And if you haven't heard the From Hell analysis that I did, I should say the From Hell letter analysis, the more or less nutshell version was that I have absolutely no idea if the From Hell letter was authentic or not. It was sent in with a box that contained half a kidney that was preserved in some type of alcohol. Somebody even speculated that it could have been formaldehyde. Formaldehyde did indeed exist at the time, but I have no idea if that was the kidney that belonged to Catherine Eddowes, because, I mean, I'm just seeing all types of conflicting things. Even if you get on Whitechapel Jack right now, you can read that, oh, Catherine Eddowes had Bright's disease, and the kidney that was mailed in also was from someone with Bright's disease. But is that true? I mean, I just feel like that's a very unsubstantiated claim. The only point that I think I feel convinced of is they were unable to determine that the kidney actually came from a woman, because more or less the male and the female kidneys are identical. And there was even the doctor named Sedgwick Saunders that was quoted saying they should never have said that the kidney had come from a woman. A pig's kidney is almost identical. People should have just admitted that they didn't know the gender and the origin of where the kidney came from. And I mean, I've done an episode on this channel once called Gift of Love, talking about the death of Daniel Huffman. They made a movie about him called A Gift of Love. That's why it's called that. It's with Debbie Reynolds and Eldon Heston. And it's all about how a teenage boy wants to donate his kidney to his grandmother, and he's giving up his chance to be a collegiate athlete because of that. And, well, I mean, that's the whole point, though. The male and the female kidney can be transplanted to another person. There isn't this type of identifying marker without using DNA technology. So I'm somewhat convinced of that. Did the person actually have Bright's disease? I have no idea. Was that actually the kidney that belonged to Catherine Eddowes, mailed in by the real Ripper and the real murderer? I have no idea as well, but the hoax version of the Ripper theory is that the first two letters that we've talked about on this channel, the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jack postcard, were written by a journalist named Frederick Best, who confessed to that in 1931. He did it to save the newspaper, the Star, the publication rather, and to just generate publicity, sales, get more people fascinated with the news. It was a genuine case of fake news. Then the From Hell letter was written by either a medical student or a medical student provided the kidney to someone who wrote the From Hell letter. They said any advanced medical student could have had gotten their hands on a kidney. And I'm somewhat skeptical of the claims that this was all matching up exactly to Catherine Eddowes, because there are so many people that have, since challenged some of the claims that were made in the media. And oh, what was that? What was the name of that one doctor anyway? The one that had to Openshaw, who said that he even had to make public appearances talking about how the media has been misquoting him and misstating him. And George Lusk, the man who received the From Hell letter in the kidney, dismissed it initially as a prank or a hoax. Is it really the case? I don't know, but those are really also the three documents mailed in by Jack the Ripper: the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jack postcard, and the From Hell letter that gets serious consideration. There are lots of other Ripper communications, just the way that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Zodiac communications, but most of them have been dismissed as pranks and hoaxes, and as I understand it, they're just getting hundreds of pieces of writing mailed in to the newspapers in 1969 and 1970, and they're even just little scraps of paper saying something like, I'm the Zodiac, I'm coming to get you, and they're like just dismissing them. And Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com even postulated that, is it possible that an authentic communication was dismissed because it just looked too simple? The same way that somebody like George Lusk would look at the From Hell letter and think, there's no way this is real. I mean, it's definitely possible based on the frequency and the amount of communications that came in, so we really do not know. But as for the murder of Liz Stride, I think that both of these guys, Matthew and Shaperard, make some very good points. I also think that the timeline is rather off in her case, but I'm very impressed the way that people can reconstruct crime scenes that occurred in the 1800s all the way back to 1888, and there is just a lot of forensic material and analysis that has been well documented, and it goes all the way back to the police and the investigators at the time. They have police reports that have been preserved, and not to mention the photographs of the letter. The original From Hell letter no longer exists, but they have recorded that. I believe they have the original Dear Boss letter, which was stolen and then returned to the police archives in 1988 for the 100th anniversary. But that's just my final concluding note on Jack the Ripper and the murder of Liz Stride. If anybody has anything that they would like to include in the comment section down below, I would invite you to do so. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And you can always go to BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram, and I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.